At 85 years old, Jack Nicklaus is remembered as the greatest golfer who ever lived. But the man the world calls golf's golden bear has quietly buried a piece of his heart more than once, carrying losses so painful they would have broken almost anyone. Behind the 18 majors and the famous smile is a story of devastating grief. Here's the full story. To the outside world, Jack Nicklaus has always looked untouchable, and that is exactly the problem, because the golden image is what hid the heartbreak. Yes, he won 18 professional major championships, a record that has stood for half a century. Yes, he married Barbara in 1960 and is still married to her today, 66 years later. Yes, he raised 5 children and built a sprawling family that now includes 24 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren, with no public scandal and no spectacular fall from grace. From a distance, it looks like the one perfect life golf ever produced, but that distance is the lie. Up close, Jack Nicklaus has lived through tragedy so profound that it would have destroyed most people, and he carried almost all of it where the cameras could never see. The world watched everything he won. It never saw everything he lost, and what he lost is genuinely heartbreaking. Because behind the records and the family photos and the easy smile, the greatest golfer who ever lived has been forced to grieve in ways no trophy could ever soften, again and again, across his entire life. It started earlier than most people realize. As a boy growing up in Columbus, Ohio, in the early 1950s, during the height of the American polio epidemic, young Jack contracted the disease. He had a mild case and recovered, but his younger sister was hit much harder. For a child, watching that fear move through his own home, watching a sibling suffer from something that was paralyzing and killing children all across the country, was a brush with mortality that arrived long before the trophies ever did. It was the first sign that the perfect life was never going to be quite as perfect as it looked from the outside. But the first truly devastating blow came in 1970. Jack's father, Charlie Nicklaus, was not just his dad. He was his best friend, his biggest believer, the man who had put a golf club in his hands as a boy and shown up to watch him chase greatness. In fact, golf entered Jack's life through Charlie in the first place. Charlie, a former athlete, had injured his ankle and took up the game on doctor's orders to rehabilitate it, bringing his 10-year-old son along to the course to keep him company. That simple act, a father working through his own pain and refusing to go it alone, is the reason the world ever got to know Jack Nicklaus at all. Charlie was a pharmacist in Columbus, a larger-than-life presence in Jack's world, and the two were inseparable. And in 1970, Charlie died of cancer at just 56 years old. Jack was devastated in a way the public rarely saw. He later admitted that in the years right before his father's death, he had let himself drift, gotten a little comfortable, a little soft, a little distracted from the relentless drive that had made him great. Losing Charlie shattered him, and it also lit a fire. Grief became fuel. In the wake of his father's death, Jack rededicated himself completely to the game, and went on one of the most dominant runs of his entire career through the early 1970s. He won in part to honor the man who would never get to watch him do it again. Every major after 1970 carried the quiet weight of a son trying to make his late father proud. Quick pause. If Jack Nicklaus is the greatest golfer who ever lived in your eyes, type GOAT in the comments. If you have always respected the way he carried himself through everything, type class. I read every single one, and then came the loss that by every account broke the Nicklaus family in a way nothing else ever has. In early 2005, Jack's 17-month-old grandson, Jake Walter Nicklaus, the young son of Jack's son Steve, was playing in the family's hot tub at their Florida home with his older brother and their nanny. When the group went inside to change clothes, little Jake slipped out of sight, made his way back through a sliding door to the hot tub where he had been playing, and fell in. The nanny realized he was missing, found him in the water, and performed CPR until rescue workers arrived. But it was too late. Jake died at the hospital. He was a baby. And in an instant, the family that seemed to have been spared every hardship was plunged into the worst grief a family can know, the loss of a child. The timing made it almost unbearably poignant. That spring, just weeks after Jake's death, Jack was scheduled to play in the Masters, which would be the final Masters appearance of his legendary career. He did not know if he could do it. It was his son Steve, Jake's grieving father, who insisted that his dad go and play, who pushed him to walk those fairways at Augusta one last time. And so Jack Nicklaus said goodbye to the tournament he had won a record 6 times, while carrying a fresh and unimaginable sorrow that no gallery could see. A few months later, at the 2005 Open Championship at St. Andrews, the home of golf, he walked across the Swilcan Bridge and waved farewell to competitive major golf forever. And even that storybook ending was wrapped in private heartbreak. What the family did next tells you everything about who they are. Out of the unbearable loss of baby Jake, Jack and Barbara Nicklaus poured themselves into helping other children. Their philanthropic work in children's healthcare expanded enormously, and their name now sits on children's hospitals and pediatric care networks that have helped countless sick kids and grieving families. They took the worst thing that ever happened to them and turned it into a mission to spare other families the same pain. But anyone who has lost a child will tell you that no amount of good works ever fills the hole. The death of Jake still haunts the Nicklaus family to this day, a quiet, permanent grief beneath all the success. And just when you would think a man in his 80s, a man who has given so much to the game, would be allowed to simply enjoy his legacy in peace, golf handed Jack Nicklaus one final, almost surreal indignity, a battle over his own name. Back in 2007, Nicklaus sold the rights to his name, image and likeness to a business partner in a deal worth around $145 million. Years later, that arrangement curdled into a bitter, drawn-out legal war. His former partner's company moved to stop Nicklaus from using the name Jack Nicklaus to promote golf course design and endorsements without the company's permission. A court issued an injunction that, astonishingly, barred the greatest golfer who ever lived from freely licensing his own name and likeness while the case played out. Think about how cruel that is. The man who, as one writer put it, arguably is golf, found himself legally fighting just to use his own name in the twilight of his life. He pushed back, he filed his own lawsuits, he refused to quit, because quitting was never in him. But the spectacle of Jack Nicklaus battling in courtrooms to reclaim his own identity is its own kind of tragedy, a sad and undignified footnote forced onto one of the most dignified careers the sport has ever known. There have been health scares too. In March of 2020, before most of the world even understood what was coming, Jack and Barbara both contracted COVID-19, and Jack was genuinely sick. Like many men his age, he has endured the slow accumulation of the body breaking down, surgeries and replacements, and the quiet daily reminders that even the golden bear is mortal. And perhaps the loneliest part of living so long is watching the world you conquered disappear around you. His greatest rival and dear friend Arnold Palmer is gone. So many of the players he battled across the 1960s and 1970s, the men who shared the arena with him and understood exactly what that life demanded, have passed away one by one. To be the last man standing from a golden era is its own quiet grief, the kind that does not make headlines but settles in deep. So when you really look at the life of Jack Nicklaus, you see something very different from the fairy tale. Yes, he won more majors than anyone. Yes, he has a marriage and a family that most people can only dream of. But he also lost his beloved father far too young, watched polio move through his childhood home, buried a baby grandson in the most heartbreaking circumstances imaginable, and spent his final chapter fighting in court over the right to his own name. The man the world chose as the symbol of the perfect golfing life was carrying as much hidden sorrow as any of the troubled legends we so easily label as tragic. Today, at 85 years old, Jack Nicklaus is still here, still sharp, still showing up at Augusta each spring to hit the ceremonial opening tee shot, still cracking jokes with his grandkids, still married to the same woman he fell in love with as a young man. By any measure, he has lived an extraordinary life, and he would be the first to count his blessings rather than his sorrows. That is who he is. But that is also what makes his story so quietly heartbreaking. Because the lesson of Jack Nicklaus is that there is no such thing as a life without tragedy, not even for the greatest of all time, not even for the man who seemed to have everything. Behind the 18 majors and the perfect marriage and the famous smile was a father grieving his father, a grandfather grieving a baby, and a legend forced to fight for his own name. He carried all of it with a grace and a quietness that made the world believe he had been spared. He never was. He simply refused to let the weight of it show. And maybe that is the most Jack Nicklaus thing of all. The greatest champion golf has ever produced spent a lifetime making the hardest game in the world look easy. It turns out he did the same thing with grief. If this one touched you, drop a like before you scroll away. It is the single biggest thing that tells the algorithm to push these stories to other golf fans who might never see them otherwise. And subscribe if you want more of these, the kind that look past the headlines to the real story underneath. There are more coming.